Hello, I'm Corey Moss, and this is a Convergent Tech Project interview, and I'm with Gary Hall of Cisco. How are you, Gary?
I'm doing well, Corey.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Gary Hall describes himself on LinkedIn as a business strategist, public speaker, writer, and technologist. He is currently the Chief Technology Officer for Federal Defense at Cisco Systems, former Chief Architect for the intelligence community at Cisco Systems, Secretary Treasurer on the Board of Directors of Infocomm International, CTO Advisory Committee Telecommunications Industry Association, TIA. Gary lists many specialties. I will read a few of them: the Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, cloud computing, secure mobility, cybersecurity, big data, audiovisual telecommunications, collaboration, unified communications, virtualization, software defined networking. He has an MBA, MS, CTSD, and CTSI. Gary began his career as an audiovisual specialist in 1998, and through the next 10 years, he progressed in the AV industry, also becoming a well recognized professional with Infocomm International. Gary has been with Cisco here in Washington, D.C., and again is the Chief Technology Officer, Federal Defense for the company. So, Gary, again, it's great to have you here. And we'll just get started off where I'm going to ask, as Chief Technology Officer for Federal Defense at Cisco Systems, what are your responsibilities?
That's a pretty big list, right? There's a lot of different things that come into the role. But I'd have to say, some of my primary responsibilities include keeping ahead of emerging technology trends, especially those that impact our business, right?
Mm-hmm.
To develop and apply architectures that support our customers' business and mission outcomes is absolutely critical. I do a lot of work to adapt commercial solutions for use in military applications. So we're taking technologies off the shelf and applying them to military scenarios. I also lead the federal strategy and planning for our Internet of Things and Internet of Everything focus areas. And I help to lead the public sector cross-architecture efforts. So where we're bringing together a lot of different technologies, I work to make sure that we're doing that effectively. Let's see what else. I also work with our partners to develop solutions and whole offerings, not just focusing on products, but looking at how all those products interact and what the services and other components are to bring those to market so that they can impact the customers. But I'd have to say the most important thing is engaging with the customers through things like conferences and symposiums and direct meetings to understand what their needs are and to help them apply the appropriate technologies to solve their problems or to add value in some way.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, as discussed, starting in 98 in audiovisual up till now, the progressions you've made through the years, how have they taken you up to your current position where you are at Cisco?
That's a good question. It really has been a progression, and video has been at the core of my career path since the very beginning. Actually, going back even a little further than that, my first job out of college was doing video production for Time Warner in a local cable affiliate, and that just helped me to fall in love with video. I mean, going back even further into high school, I resurrected our audio-visual club in high school that had gone dormant, and I pushed so hard to get that recognized that we actually turned it into a 4-credit course that I took my senior year of high school.
Mm.
So it's kind of cool to take the course that you created. It's kind of an easy way to get an A, right? But,
Right.
through my career progression, video has been the constant thread. I started out really on the operations side and focused on leading teams of audiovisual experts. And that's where I got exposed to video conferencing back in the days of the VTEL Rembrandts and things like that, the really early video systems, the ones that took up a whole rear projection room just to fit the gear.
Mm-hmm.
And then that took me through, as video emerged and evolved and became a critical component of collaboration. I've stuck with it. I took a little different path out of operations for a while. I moved into government, and my original role there was to be a program manager managing voice and video and audiovisual for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And that even took me in some directions I hadn't expected. I'd always been more on the operational side, and I moved into the office of the CIO in a policy area, focusing on the development of meta tagging standards for the National System for Geospatial Intelligence. But the thing there is that's high resolution imagery and full motion video, and it gave me a whole new element of understanding of the industry. So coming out of there to come out to Cisco just took it to the next level. I came to Cisco just after the Tandberg acquisition, and was a big part of the assimilation of Tandberg from a federal perspective within Cisco. So, it's been a lot of fun. I've gotten to see the industry from a lot of different perspectives, as a consultant, as an operator, now on the manufacturing side, and even in government. So it's been a pretty good ride, and it's been a lot of fun. And each step just gave me more perspective on how important video is to meeting the requirements of an organization.
Oh, okay, good. And I like to work outside the box, and it sounds like there was some outside the box working. And what we're going to talk about now is definitely outside the box of what you normally discuss in the audiovisual realm, and even call it AVIT, bordering more on the IT side. So the first thing we're going to discuss is the Internet of Things, or as Cisco refers to as the Internet of Everything. And I wanted to read a little statement here from John Chambers, the CEO of Cisco, um, in terms of the Internet of Things, which says making the seemingly impossible possible. The IOE is expanding our understanding and enriching our experiences. Our goal is to connect the remaining everything, and not just to connect, but to change everything for the better. A very bold statement from John Chambers. So what I'll get into next is that one of your key specialties is the Internet of Things, or Cisco terms, the Internet of Everything. Can you give your perspectives on IOE and Cisco's approach to the market?
Sure. Well, first, I'd like to touch on the difference between the Internet of Things, or IoT, and the Internet of Everything, or IoE. At Cisco, we define IoT as machine-to-machine communications and sensor technology, so very much in the machine communications element. The Internet of Everything expands on the Internet of Things, so that it takes things and also includes people, process, and data. So it's a much larger span for the Internet of Everything. So this takes us from machine communications to machine to human, where that data is transformed into information that humans can use, and then to human, or what we call collaboration, which is directly aligned in a huge part of what professional audiovisual delivers. So with that out of the way, I'll talk a little bit about what the IOE market is. It's an absolutely massive growth driver. In the 10-year period starting in 2013, so we're already moving down this path, Cisco's projected $19 trillion, 19 trillion with a T, dollars in value at stake for the combined private and public sector. So this is all due to the value of connections. So that's what we're talking about, is how do we make more connections and create more value out of those connections? And looking at those numbers, when you talk about things like value at stake, you're not talking about just direct corporate profits. That's certainly a big aspect of it, but it's also things like efficiency, cost avoidance, that type of stuff. And as we connect the other 99% of things, knowing that today, less than 1% of the world's things are connected. As we connect that other 99%, amazing things are going to happen. A lot of people think of this as a future trend, but it's already here. We actually reached the inflection point on this back in 2008, and we're now in the hyper growth mode. So you can see IoT and IoE everywhere, right? From the wearables market, things like Fitbits and the iWatch that are coming out, to smart homes and smart vehicles. In defense, the Internet of Everything has the potential to actually realize the vision of net-centric warfare that was developed in the 1990s, where we connect the entire battlefield.
Mhm.
the planes, the ground forces, the shipboard systems in a way that allows them better insights and better decision making processes. Um, Another element of the Internet of Things is the concept of fog computing. Fog computing is really interesting. It's taking all of the compute capacity and splitting it out so that you actually have a thin layer of compute out at the tactical edge so that you can do things like real-time analytics based on the machine and sensor data that you're accumulating. That then connects back to cloud computing so that you can do things like regressive analytics and long-term studies of the data. So what that does is it gives us an opportunity to create that value by taking the data from the sensors and devices and then to transform that data out at the edge in real time into information, right? So that humans can actually start using it for decision making processes. We
Mhm.
then take it and we aggregate multiple sources of data and turn that information into knowledge. And then over time, by connecting the fog back to the cloud, we can generate wisdom that helps us, make better decisions long term for our organization. So really, kind of an exciting approach. And one thing I like to think about when it comes to fog computing is the idea that you have something that's really kind of similar to the old mainframe computing in cloud, right? Where you're centralizing a lot of the data storage and computational power. But then we're taking what is very similar in approach to what happened with the PC disruption of mainframe by taking a thin layer of the compute out to the edge. But the difference this time is while the PC disrupted the mainframe, the fog and the cloud are working together to create another order of magnitude of value. So that's pretty exciting. So the market approach here is really to extend IP to the edge beyond the controlled IT environments, places where you have control over your HVAC and your power consumption, places where you have carpet, right? And to move it out into what I call the dirty places, like places where there's no carpet, places where you don't have control of the environmental factors, places that aren't even fixed locations, they're on the move. So that's kind of a roundup of some of the big themes in the Internet of Everything.
Mhm.
But again, it all comes back to how do we create value out of these connections?
You tied in multiple technologies very well into that, and I have read on fog computing, and I'm glad you did tie fog computing into this, and big data as well, because big data is becoming a larger talk in the industry, and it certainly can get larger. So to talk about big data. And as it refers to the industry, what are your thoughts in terms of how that can tie into the audiovisual industry in particular?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked because I have some pretty good thoughts on it. I think big data. When we see the waves of evolution of the internet, and you look at the first phase of the internet, it was about connectivity. Connecting research labs and military institutions. Then it went to e-commerce. Then it went to the third phase where we had social and video and things like that coming onto the internet. Now we're moving into this Internet of Everything where we're connecting all of these things. Each one of those waves created another order of magnitude of big data generation, a massive iteration over time. So the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything is driving another layer of exponential growth of big data. And where that equates to video, when I was the metadata officer, one of my primary jobs was to figure out how do we do the retention policies for these massive amounts of data, whether it's high resolution imagery or full motion video data, right? Big, huge files. And when I was doing that job, I realized that video is not just big data, it's big large data. So let me dissect that a little bit. Video is large file sizes and a lot of them, right? So when you talk about big data, generally you're talking about a lot of files, right? When you talk about big large data, then you're talking about a lot of really big files, right? So it's kind of interesting to see how much of an impact all of the video that's moving across networks and that's being stored and being analyzed and being used is how that's impacting operations for an organization. So the key is to be able to make sense out of that data and transform it, like I said, into information, knowledge, and wisdom, so that it's usable, right? So I think the machine to machine world has a very strong capability of taking the feeds from things like physical security cameras, sessions like telepresence, streaming video content, and making better sense out of it. So it's easier to discover the data that you want, and it's easier to use the data for something meaningful within an organization. So I think there's a whole lot of growth opportunity for the audiovisual industry as it starts to embrace its contribution to big data at large and starts to look even deeper into the analytics side of the content that we create and manage.
No, that's great. And like I say, big data is becoming larger talk in the industry, and I think this is going to be very revealing for people. Now, I have written on IoT, and I just actually wrote a machine-to-machine blog, which was actually I do a lot of what I write of my writing. I see articles, white papers, and that becomes a topic. And machine to me machine just became a great blog for me to write. And now you're talking about that in terms of Internet of Everything, Internet of Things. So these are honestly great perspectives for the industry with that big data and the rest. So no, this is all great information. Absolutely. So what I want to do now is I want to move on to the next topic. And again, this is something that I do write about, cybersecurity, which is, of course, another specialty. And I do want to say that Gary and I met last year at a Cisco IT conference in DC, and we did speak about a number of things, being mobile. I know we talked about mobility and collaboration, and cybersecurity was another thing we had discussed. So I do want to read another thing off of Cisco's website. And what it says is weak links can take many forms. And this is one statement. And the next is some of the systems we rely on most have hidden vulnerabilities. Cyber criminals are devoted to finding and exploiting them. So, of course, in the world right now, in the corporate world, government, and other realms, cybersecurity is one of the biggest topics of discussion. So, Gary, can you discuss cybersecurity in the Cisco realm as well as how it relates to the Internet of Things?
Sure. So I'll actually start in the defense space since I focus primarily in that environment. And obviously, cyber is a huge concern for the Department of Defense and for the intelligence community. So in defense, we now see cyber as the fifth combat domain. It used to be that those domains were land, sea, and air. Then along came space, right? And we had a new frontier. To give a shout out to Mr. Nimoy. And now we've moved on and added a fifth domain of cyber. So, I see cyber now as a legitimate combat domain. The Internet of Things creates an amazing potential for connections, like I was talking about earlier. But just as these connections can create value, they also create new potential risks.
Right.
All of these sensors and devices create new attack vectors for the bad guys. This isn't a linear or a cyclical threat, but it's really an omnidirectional threat matrix. Sensors and devices create these new points of entry into the network. So each one of these devices that's connecting to the network is a new point of entry. So you have to protect those points of entry. For example, the big Target cyber breach was the point of entry for that was the HVAC system. Right. So that's part of the Internet of Things. As you're connecting these formerly unconnected systems to the IP network, you're creating these new potential points of insertion and risk. So, but attacks can go the other way as well, right? So if a network is hacked, the adversaries can attack the IoT devices.
Right.
And, it's one thing if someone hacks into my phone, right, and they get some of my personal data, they listen to my voicemails, they read my text messages. That could be damaging, probably embarrassing, but not necessarily life-threatening. But what happens when someone hacks into your car when you're driving around the DC Beltway at 60 miles an hour and deploys your airbag?
Right.
So those are the types of things we have to think about when it comes to IoT. We have to think about the threat matrix, and we have to think about how do we protect from the sensors and devices out at the edge into the network to keep our network secure, but also how do we protect from the network back out to those devices to keep those end users of those devices and those systems safe and secure. So that's why it's so important to have a total cyber threat defense. Right, you can't just look at it from one piece of the equation. At Cisco, we take cyber protection really seriously. Last year, we acquired a company, a market leader in security called SourceFire. We've also recently acquired an email and web security company called IronPort, a company called ScanSafe, and another one called Securant. So putting those together with all of our internally developed security products, things like the Identity Services Engine that does context-based decision-making and policy enforcement, things like our next generation firewalls, all of those elements have made us number one in the network security market. So that spans intrusion protection, firewalls, malware protection, access and mobility, email, web security, all those types of areas. But total cyber threat defense means protecting data from when it's created throughout its entire life cycle. So as it's replicated, as it's exploited and transformed, as it's stored and retrieved, it's no longer a question of if your organization will be attacked. Really, it's a question of when it will be attacked. So we focus on protecting before, during, and after an attack. We used to look at cyber in a couple of different ways that maybe made a lot of sense to the engineers, right, when we're talking about things like trust, visibility, and resilience. But when you're talking to the end customers and they just want to make sure that they're keeping their data safe, it makes a lot more sense to talk about what you do before, what you do during, and what you do after an attack to protect across that continuum. And as we add all of these different components onto the network, we have to look at things like how do we put advanced cryptography out into the sensors and devices? How do we protect it at the point of aggregation into the IP network at those edge router locations? And how do we protect it as it's changed and transformed? I'm doing a lot of work in those areas with some very interesting companies that specialize in things like certificate management and cryptography. So it's kind of fun stuff.
I'll tell you, when I was at the IT conference, I did get to meet with some people at SourceFire. That was really my introduction into the cybersecurity side at Cisco, and I believe that was maybe not too long after Cisco had acquired them. Very strategic in what you're saying now in terms of all the companies that Cisco has. It looks like Cisco is building very, very big into the cybersecurity space. And of course, IoT, as you say, is becoming highly recognized at this point as a very vulnerable realm. And I actually know a CEO in mobile security who is versed in IoT and is one of the leaders now in IoT security. He had moderated a panel at Black Hat in Vegas last year. And even on the mobile side at this point, certainly a lot of devotion to the mobility BYOD side in terms of security, mobile and cybersecurity. Can you talk on that a little?
Well, it's all part of that same continuum. We need to protect from the edge where all the sensors and devices and other content is created and used back into the cloud environments where data is stored and analyzed. So, mobility is no longer a nice to have. It's just part of the fabric of the way we do business. So, protecting in environments where we used to not bring the IP network is now an imperative. Right, getting into those places out at the fog edge, into those environments. For IoT to realize that full value at stake, that $19 trillion, we have to have rock solid security from the edge to the network and all encompassing security. And that includes things like insider threat as well. So, there's a lot of different directions we can go as far as the mobile environment. But the bottom line is that we have to understand the context of the data. We have to understand how we're making the connections. We have to understand what we need to do to properly secure it and put multiple layers of security so that we can be effective even over assumed hostile or untrusted transport mediums for the data. So we have to protect at that level because we're moving over wireless, we're moving over 3G, 4G, LTE, we're moving over lots of different types of network mediums, and we're not staying static so that we're only connecting in through one means. So it's really about looking at security holistically and applying the appropriate protections across every layer so that you have multiple layers of security and keep ahead of the adversaries because they're always finding vulnerabilities, and we have to continue to stay one step ahead.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about insider threat. I think what's most interesting is that it seems to be becoming more predominant in terms of results of hacks. That it's coming from more insiders than outside. Um, so, I think that's a giant focus now to look at it from the inside as well as the outside.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean by total threat protection, right? We got to look at it from every angle, inside and out. And there's other elements. Security is not just cybersecurity. To look at security holistically, cybersecurity is a component, but we also have to look at physical security and operation security.
Right.
And I think the insider threat piece is probably most effectively managed from an operational security standpoint, with strong additional layers of protection from both physical security and cybersecurity elements. But it's a tough problem to solve because you want to trust the people within your organization. But it's kind of like the old adages of trust but verify. This is trust but protect, right? We have to be able to protect our intellectual property, our classified information, our business differentiators from being exposed. And we have what's called trusted systems initiatives within Cisco, where we do everything from protecting across the life cycle of the products to integrating advanced cryptography into the core of our product lines. It's a holistic approach to just the way we manage our products and services so that we embed holistic security across the operational, physical, and cyber domains.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then video conferencing, let's say you talk about secure video conference, high-level encryption, even HIPAA, for the medical industry, and you do have your regulations for the government and military as well. So why don't you talk on that as well?
Sure. I've done a lot of work in that space. Like I said earlier, when I first went to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, one of my jobs was to manage all of the video and telepresence for the agency. And those all operate on classified networks, top secret SCI networks, which in some ways is good because they're closed networks and they're not exposed to some of the public internet challenges that we have. But in other ways, the protection levels are so high that we have to have really rock solid security to prevent any sort of absolutely critical data or information from being exposed to anyone that shouldn't have that data, including people within the organization who don't have the right level of access to be a part of those types of sessions or to see the outputs of those sessions if they're recorded and streamed later on and that type of thing. From a HIPAA perspective, I actually had the opportunity to sit on a panel a few years ago with Dr. Braithwaite, who a lot of folks consider the father of HIPAA. And we were talking about the types of protections that we put into place, these advanced cryptography elements, these multiple layers of security that we put in place for telepresence and video in the intelligence community, and how we can apply those to meet the HIPAA requirements. And we had a really good dialogue about how those same approaches can be used to protect the individual. Because if you think about it, security and privacy are flip sides of the same coin, right? When you talk about security, you're talking about security of protecting the information and data of an organization. Well, when you're talking privacy, you're protecting the information and data of an individual. It's really the same types of things, just applied to a different audience. So I think there's a lot we can do, especially as we move into things like mobile healthcare records and telehealth initiatives and those types of things, to apply those same layering of cryptographic elements and certificate management and context-based computing components to allow mobile telehealth. And we're doing a lot of work here in Cisco for military health and Department of Veterans Affairs and folks like that to try and apply some of these technologies to help them to better serve their constituents, right, and serve the folks that need the medical attention in a way that allows the information to still be controlled and managed and maintained, and their privacy to be assured. So there's some interesting ways we can apply things that are used for classified space for other applications, and that goes the same even for corporate entities, right, that are protecting their intellectual capital. They're the same types of protections.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that's terrific. Really good information on the subject. So next, I wanted to get into you're a speaker and a writer. What are the main subjects that you speak about in public and like to write about as well?
Well, these days, the Internet of Everything is taking up most of my time because it's everything, right? It's this huge topic umbrella, and the great thing about the Internet of Everything is it's holistic and it's expansive, and it moves beyond IT into operational technologies and all the way out to the edge. So that's a really good storyline to talk about the connected devices and sensors and things on one side, and the cloud and data center components on the other side, and then talk about the intelligence and the network that connects them all together. Right. So, when I'm talking about the Internet of Everything, I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about how do we do the things that are needed to drive towards truly business and mission relevant outcomes. That's a big theme for us, is to focus on the outcomes and not just focus on the products themselves, but focus on what the results are to the customers in the end, and how they can apply the technologies in ways that meet their business needs. But that said, I still have the opportunity to focus in some other areas. Most of my writing recently has been on securing the Internet of Things, some of the things we just talked about, and what needs to happen to truly secure the Internet of Things so that we can move on to the Internet of Everything, because that's a critical enabler. If we can do that, we can start to unlock the value while protecting the information and the people. I also speak on a variety of related topics, things like unified communications and collaboration. I've spoken mostly on Super Tuesday at Infocomm for the last many years, but also in other capacities at Infocomm, TIA conference, those types of things. A lot of military conferences, AFCEA sponsored conferences, and some others. Had the opportunity to talk a lot about secure mobility over the last few years, virtualization in the data center, in the desktop, and in the network, or what we call software-defined networking and application-centric infrastructure. Talk at big data conferences, talk at cloud conferences, stuff like that. So, sometimes I speak in the context of defense and intelligence, but not always. The underlying themes are usually the same, whether you're talking to a group of military officers or business leaders. So, I like to look at the commonality of how we address their needs rather than to try and focus on their differences. We can figure out what those nuanced differences are, but the fundamentals of business, military operations, nonprofits, governmental, they're all the same. They have outcomes that they need to drive to, and we need to apply the appropriate technologies to reach those outcomes. The only other thing I'd say here is occasionally I get an opportunity to focus more on the business and the people side. So I've participated recently in things like veterans transition initiatives, some leadership conferences, some diversity forums, and I really like that part. That's a lot of fun. Sometimes there's a little technology element to it, but it's always good to look at ways to participate in the community and not always focus on the technology, but really sometimes focus directly in on the people and the business.
Mm-hmm. When you go to Infocom, what are the certain things that you talk about, the things that you like to focus on when you're at Infocom?
Well, I've done a lot of different things at the Infocom show over the years and in other forums. I've taught many different types of classes, from technical classes to leadership courses. Recently, because my schedule at Infocom's gotten a little bit crazy with my board obligations and other things, I've focused more in on a Super Tuesday session. I created several years ago a unified communications and collaboration Super Tuesday session that's
Mhm.
continued on for several years, and we've changed leadership. I've handed it over in I guess 2 years ago, but I still participate in that. In the last 2 years, I've been bringing discussion of the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything in the context of professional audiovisual, because when I talk about that machine to machine, machine to human, and human to human, audiovisual is right at the core of that human to human component, which is the top of the value chain. So I like to remind everyone in the audiovisual industry that the skill sets that we have are absolutely in the highest demand, and we need to understand how all these other things that are kind of influencing our industry can be a benefit to our membership. So that's kind of what I've been talking about primarily at Infocom in
Mhm.
recent years.
Mhm. Well, I'll tell you what, I've been at Infocom the last 2 years. It was actually a few years since I had been there, but I certainly would look forward to meeting with Cisco this year, seeing all the things that are being done there. Last year, I actually wrote a top 10 of different kinds of solutions, or as they call it, I call them disruptive. Things that are disrupting the market. What do you think Cisco is doing at this point to disrupt the market?
Disrupt which market? Because we're disrupting a lot of them. Are you talking the professional audiovisual market? Or are you
Well, let's talk
talking?
about audiovisual for now.
Okay, I'll start there, but then I'll give you a couple of other quick ones.
Great.
So in the professional audiovisual market, we're taking a very strong customer interface approach. If you saw the stuff that we unveiled at Infocom last year, the simplicity of the systems and the total refresh of our entire telepresence and video portfolio was a big deal, right? This is the first major full product line refresh that we've done in several years, and it's going really well. And along with that came amazing price points. So I think that's a big disruptor in and of itself, that we're driving video into places that may not have been affordable in the past by giving really good price points. Another disruption is that a lot of our systems, especially the personal telepresence systems, are now operating on the Android OS, which creates a whole suite of opportunities to create developer networks around it, to crowdsource new capabilities on those platforms. So that's pretty exciting. And in keeping with the developer theme, we have created a thing called developer.cisco.com that allows us to develop a really strong developer community, and a lot of that is focused on the video space, developments for Jabber and things like that. So I'm pretty excited about that. We've got a big cloud focus. We own WebEx, we own Jabber, we own the telepresence business line, former Tandberg stuff, and we're bringing all that stuff together in really interesting ways, and we're able to connect it not just to our own stuff, but to standards-based systems, whatever they are, whether they're software-based, um, whether they're hardware, whatever those endpoints are. And another thing we've done recently is to create the WebEx-enabled telepresence sessions, so that you don't have to choose whether you're going to have a meeting over telepresence or over WebEx. You can do both, and we've integrated the Jabber client to allow things like one-touch meeting launch for WebEx and things like that. So
Right.
a lot of interesting stuff in the AV professional audiovisual space and out to the desktop. So I'm pretty excited about what we're doing with our video portfolio, and we've got a lot of new stuff coming. There's a few things I can't talk about just yet, but will be announced imminently. And there's a few things that were kind of soft announced at ISE, so I guess I can kind of bring those up a little bit. I won't give all the details, but I'll say go out there and Google Cisco and vBrick and see what we're doing together, because there's some interesting things happening
Oh, good.
in that space as well.
Hmm.
Um, and what you find on the public internet is yours to keep. So um, the other areas that I'm really focused on from a market disruption more holistically, even going beyond video, but definitely having ties back into video. One is our application-centric infrastructure, where we're kind of taking software-defined networking to the next level and really driving control of the network into the application layer, so that those applications can directly interface with the network without the need for extensive code bridging and command line interface and stuff like that. I think there's going to be some really cool video applications of that in the future as we expose more of the network to the applications themselves and create new capabilities. And that's going to be critical getting into this Internet of Things component as well, because you can't manually orchestrate and provision all of those devices. You need to have some network intelligence in there. So that one's pretty exciting. Another one that I'm really excited about is called Intercloud Fabric. So the Intercloud Fabric is a way to manage workloads from existing on-premise data centers to public cloud, the Amazons, the Microsoft Azures, and then the Cisco powered clouds, like, them private clouds, like Dimension Data and some others provide. So pretty exciting way to be able to give the customers control of their workloads and pick what environment from a cloud perspective best suits them, so they can start to pull the levers of cloud, right? They can choose which of the three main factors in cloud, the cost, the security, and the usability, are most important to them, and find the right place to host their workloads. And they can always bring those workloads back. So that's kind of exciting, because it's hypervisor agnostic, and there's a lot of things that give control back to the end users. So I think those are a couple that I'm excited about. I could go on and on, go back to the security conversation, talk about IoT and IoE some more, but the market disruptions are all over the place as we move into this next phase of the internet. There's going to be a lot of change, and the pace of change is accelerating very, very quickly.
And in my writing and all, especially with Infocom, I hadn't at that time considered Cisco a disruptor in the market, and really hadn't considered other markets at the time. But it's good to do the reveal now, because I think for the industry to find out how Cisco is disrupting the market while others are as well, I think it puts you on a very good plane at that point.
Yeah, I agree. You think of us as a big IT company, right, with our heritage in, routing and switching, and you think, okay, well, that moves stuff around. That was a huge disruption when the internet was first taking off, right? But what is it today? And our goal now is to become the number one IT company. I don't know how you exactly define what the number one IT company is, but we're moving beyond that kind of core element of routing and switching, still maintaining the value of that heritage and continuing to lead the market in those areas. But now we're leading the security market, we're leading the video market, we're leading in probably a dozen different markets of the overall IT space. And then we're moving even beyond IT into the operational technologies and out to the Internet of Things. So I'm pretty excited about it. I would say the market disruptions are going to be caused by creating value, and that value is going to be created by companies coming together to do really exciting things. Storage companies coming together with networking and compute companies, bringing in the specialists that can add value on top of platforms. All that kind of stuff is going to dramatically impact the market over the next several years as we move from products to platforms.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, that's great, and it's going to lead me into my last question here. So, a statement, we talk about AV/IT in the industry, and in fact, you worked in AV with specialization in video conferencing, unified communications, as you've said as well, for over 10 years. Since 2004, you've been, as I said, on the Infocom board of directors. PETC chair, faculty, instructor. You can correct anything if you want here. STEP, you've also acted as liaison between CompTIA and Infocomm. I hope that was all correct.
Yeah.
Uh, Tell me about your overall experience in your association with the AV industry, what it was that had caused your focus to shift to IT, which I think we talked a little bit in the beginning, cybersecurity and IoT to go along with collaboration.
Well, I'd say first off, the audiovisual industry has been very good to me. I kind of came up in the AV industry and I saw opportunity there. And like I said, video's always been at the core of what I do. Audio as well, that was when I learned, right? So I'll be fair, I'm a video guy, but the audio piece is something that I got deeply involved in because you can't have one without the other. Your telepresence session isn't very good if you don't have both. So,
Mm.
I've learned that side of the industry as well. Um, uh, Being elected to the Infocomm board was a huge honor for me. I'm really humbled that the members have entrusted me with the responsibility not only to be on the board, but to serve as an officer on the board, and in a few years ascend to president of the association. So I'm really excited about having the ability to participate in the strategic direction of the association, and I am just so proud of where the AV industry has gone over the last several years. So AV and collaboration have always been a big part of my experience and my background. So that's shaped my perspective on the overall IT industry. Um, I think collaboration is one of the most critical enablers of success in any organization. You don't get anything done if you can't collaborate and you can't work together effectively. There's no reason to go into a building with other people if you're not going to collaborate, right? So, I wouldn't necessarily say that my focus has shifted to those other areas in IoT, cyber, et cetera. I'd say it's expanded.
Mm.
Because the goals are still the same, right? To improve human communications and decision making. That's the end goal. That's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to do a better job of running our businesses. We're trying to do a better job of creating value. We're trying to do a better job of serving citizens and protecting them. So I think that's kind of the end goal, is to get to those outcomes. I think a lot in terms of AV and IT being codependent and complementary. I think it was the Infocomm, the first Infocomm 100 several years back, I think in like '09 or something like that. I got up there and addressed the group and said, convergence is done, get over it, move on to mobility, right? We've got other things to worry about. Don't be worried about AV and IT, because the IT industry knows a lot about cyberspace,
Right.
right? But the AV industry understands the intersection between the cyber world and the physical world.
Mm.
We have the skills to know how to convert digital to analog and back. We have the skills to make sense out of how signals perform in the real world. Things like properties of light and acoustics, or
Mhm.
how well a person can see a font on a display at a distance, right? These are not skill sets that the IT industry has traditionally had any interest in. These are the skills that are needed to drive business impact, though. And they're the ones that help improve efficiencies and help people make better decisions. So, I would say to everyone out there in the audiovisual industry that you're absolutely in the right place, and your skill sets are in more demand than they've ever been. So don't worry about IT. Go out there and show your value in how the audiovisual industry brings the physical world and the cyber worlds together.
Mhm.
Um, as far as some of those areas, I've been focused on cybersecurity along with AV for most of my career, because my work has been mostly in military and intelligence, where we have to secure our audiovisual systems so that they can operate on classified networks. So to me, they're not different things. They're part of the same continuum. Um, and IoT and IoE have been coming on strong over the last couple of years. But I've been working with related technologies, going back to the beginning of my career in the '90s. Things like using physical security cameras at border checkpoints when I worked at the Immigration Naturalization Service, when that still existed, before it was transformed under DHS. and things like managing high resolution imagery and full motion video, like I was talking about, from satellites and unmanned aerial vehicles.
Mhm.
The recent focus has been to connect the machine to machine world, to machines to humans and humans to human, and put it all on the IP network. But keep in mind that last part, that most critical part, the human to human piece, is all about unified communications, collaboration, and audiovisual. So,
Mhm.
that's the tip of the iceberg. That's the most important element to successful business, is the ability to collaborate and communicate effectively.
Mhm. And I picked up on something you were talking about before, Gary, in terms of AV and IT. There's been so much talk about the IT world. Is it going to consume the AV world? They can do AV. Can AV do IT? What does AVIT really mean? Those are some of the big discussions that have gone on for quite a while. I mean, what is your message to the AV industry? Which I know you gave some uh, uh, insight to it, but with that being known, IT being consuming and all, what do you say to that?
Well, it kind of goes back to some of those themes I was just talking about. Um, you got to go out there and you got to understand how the signals are being processed now. They've become part of the network. They're not separate systems that are encapsulated on closed networks over, quad BRI or ISDN lines or T1s that are dedicated for the purpose of voice and video.
Mhm.
They're not, in other scenarios, the signal never even left the room, right? And we have to deal with, how does professional audiovisual work in a networked world? Well, you need to understand the basics of the network. You don't have to be the triple CCIE network expert. You don't have to be a storage expert or a compute expert or a virtualization expert to be a very effective audiovisual expert. You have to be able to work with those other areas of expertise so that collectively you can add the appropriate level of value. So, I don't see IT as infringing on the AV world. I see quite the opposite. I see AV becoming a very important part of the IT whole environment. When you look at those areas, when I talk about those three areas, the connected devices, the intelligent network, and the cloud and data center components, when I break it down into kind of those three core components of the IP environment, I look at audiovisual on that connected devices side, for the room environment. And so I break that down into the IoT devices and sensors. I break it down into the desktop environment, the mobile environment, and the multi-user collaborative spaces where a lot of the professional audiovisual systems are connected. So my suggestion would be to continue to build on the skill sets that differentiate the audiovisual industry, the understandings of how the physical world and the cyber world interact, because that's the unique differentiator for the audiovisual space. And as long as we're doing that, and we also understand what it means to transport signals and to move data and information around over networks, we're going to be in really good shape for the future.
And I think Infocomm's doing a very good job over the last few years of setting up coursework, teaching basic networking, because you've got to start somewhere, as you say. And then there are companies that are hiring CCNEs, CCNAs. They're building managed services. These people are actually overseeing Cisco video conference systems and networks. So they are getting very progressive in terms of what they're doing in the IT space. And then if they can get into routers, switches, and all of that on the Cisco side, they just build themselves that much bigger.
Correct. And, there will be companies that see the value in audiovisual whose heritage may have come from the IT environment, but they're going to be out there building audiovisual related business practices, and that's okay. Right? We want the companies whose heritage has come through the audiovisual industry to progress and develop and know how audiovisual performs in the IT space and know what else they need to know about the network environment and to expand into the IT world. And conversely, we want to see the IT world embrace audiovisual as a fundamental enabler of the end customer's needs. And we're going to see new companies emerge out of this, and we're going to see existing companies transform as a result of the new value we can create with all of these connections. So it's an exciting time, and those that adapt and continue to evolve are going to benefit greatly. And those who don't, we know what happens when evolution stops.
Well, and there have been many ways to describe that in the industry, but that's a very good take on it. Gary, this has been great. Anything else you'd like to add to the discussion for anybody who's watching?
No, I just really appreciate the time that you've given me today, and for everyone out there that's watching, I appreciate you taking the time out to hear some of these perspectives. If you want to follow up and continue the conversation, you can reach me on LinkedIn, Gary L. Hall, at Gary L. Hall, and we can continue the conversation there. We can also continue it on Twitter, same handle. So, I am very interested in not just having a kind of one-sided discussion, but building a conversation and continuing the conversation throughout the industry, because I think that's where we all learn the most, is when we engage with each other and collaborate.
And Gary, this industry always, influencers and all is very big in this industry. And, again, I think you're very influential in terms of what you've done, what you're doing now for Cisco. And again, everybody, yeah, absolutely continue the conversation. And Gary, this has been terrific. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, take care.
Bye.